some people try to hold on to whatever the best time in their life was by years later still wearing the same hairstyle or keeping the same car that they had back then. Or, say maybe by reassembling a professional basketball team they once coached. Yep, break out the Chernobyl because over in Minnesota, they're firing up the hot tub TimberBulls machine. Yesterday, Luol Deng became the latest former Chicago Bull to agree to join his former coach Tom Thibodeau alongside his former teammate Jimmy Butler and former teammate Gibson and former teammate Derrick. As a matter of fact, Deng is the 7th of Thibs' former Bulls who has been brought through the Wolves organization since Thibs arrived. It's almost enough to make you wonder if his next move is to redecorate Minnesota's locker room like an 80s ski resort. Of course, just because one is amused by all of this, and you really would have to not have a sense of humor not to be amused, it doesn't mean that in itself the Deng signing is a bad one. Minnesota needs depth and shooting on the wing, and while clearly Deng is not the same player who back in 2011 helped Thibs win Coach of the Year and helped Rose win MVP, he's also unlikely as done as he looked during a Lakers stint that saw him play just one game all last season. The man is only 33 years old. I'm certainly willing to give him a shot to prove he still has something left, and besides, it seems the move has brought Thibodeau some goodwill around the league to boot. Here is what Dwayne Wade tweeted yesterday, noting that while he doesn't know Thibs that well, he says, quote, "I am now a bigger fan, and it's because of his loyalty. I love that he believes in his guys." And it's interesting that Wade mentions loyalty because, of course, that's the undercurrent of all of this entire situation. Who in that Wolves locker room is loyal to who? Who doesn't like who? Whose preference or presence might convince who to sign what? Karl-Anthony Towns still hasn't signed his rookie extension deal. And remember, it was just this summer that Jimmy Butler declined his extension with Minnesota. He has decided to keep his open option to become a free agent at the end of this season. So perhaps Thibs thinks that bringing in Deng, one of Jimmy's close friends on that old Bulls team, will help lay the groundwork for Butler to stay. Or perhaps it's more big picture. We've all heard the rumors of the discord between some of the Wolves' older players and their younger ones. And even if those rumors are overblown, Thibs is clearly trying to stack the team with guys who will parrot his own mindset and who could possibly provide a tipping point in the team's culture. Will any of it work? There's a ton of pressure on this team and on Thibodeau to make it work. Sure, the Wolves did just break their 13-year playoff drought, but only by the most bare margin, while remaining in the bottom third of the league defensively. If they can't improve on all that this season, there will be calls to break up this team or get rid of Thibs or both. So yes, bring on the jokes about the TimberBulls and fire up the Luol. Thibodeau has opened himself up to all of it. Just realize that in making all these moves, he's not just trying to hold on to the bygone days. He's trying to hold on to the Wolves. So, Paul, let's get right to it. Do you think the TimberBulls experiment, is this going to pay off, considering all the stuff going around these Wolves teams?
I mean, I understand what Thibs is trying to do because he's had players that he's won with, he was comfortable with. But those players are past their prime. This was a team he had in Chicago that was a top defensive team. They won't be that in Minnesota because your team is built around your young stars. You got to try to get them to buy in. And when you're comfortable like that, usually it doesn't work out. Doc Rivers brought me into the Clippers. He brought Glenn Davis in. He brought Jeff Green in, all who we played for him under the Celtics. So most times
that's a great
there's just a
one-to-one. There's a lot of people who feel the same about that.
And that's what it is, but I just don't see that working out. And then the young guys, they're like, this is our team. And then the old Bulls come in and they're like, this is the way things should be done. But that's not how it works now. This is a new generation.
How much of that did you find when you were with the Clippers? Was there some of that with Doc's team?
We weren't all there at the same time.
Right.
Glenn Davis had his stint. Jeff Green came in, then I came in. But, he has all his old guys there at the same time. And I wouldn't be surprised if Noah ends up there this year also. Yeah. So that'll be an odd situation. It'll be kind of weird.
I'm with Paul on this. I think, if anything, it creates a bigger issue in the locker room potentially because you have these different factions now with these teams. But to your point, there are two things coaches do when they also run the show from a personnel standpoint, and that's they bring in players they're familiar with, that they coached or whatnot, or players who beat their butt, basically, when they're on the other side of it. So we have this situation here with Thibs, and ultimately, look, Luol Deng is not going to tip the scales in the Western Conference by any stretch of the imagination. No, absolutely not. But you're right. He is 33 years old. I think he still has something left in the tank. But I just think Thibs is going to run into this situation where a lot of coaches run into this. It's just too much to handle the coaching day-to-day stuff and handle the personnel day-to-day stuff.
I mean, it's in San Antonio, we have a case where technically Pop has authority over all of it, but obviously R.C. Buford is doing so much of that work, and that department is doing so much of that work. Have you seen it work in basketball? You've been in the ins and outs of this league for so many years. Does it work when one guy's doing everything?
No, not at all. You need something to come from your leaders on the team. You know, they need a new voice at times because the coach, he's the GM, the manager, you know, you don't want to hear that constant voice. And Thibs has a loud voice. You know, he doesn't really allow a lot of people to speak, but I think maybe it could be a good thing to bring in Deng because he's another voice as a player. And you need that in the locker room who somebody respects. You know, he's not brought over there to tip the scales, not at all. We all know that. But he can be another leader in the locker room to get the other young guys to buy into what he's preaching. And he needs that. But you know, how much respect do these other old guys in the locker room have?
To further your point, I did that first playoff game in Minnesota against the Rockets, their first game in 14 years. And the lack of relationships within the locker room was palpable. And I was there for 2 days, okay? Right. And you could tell that there was real discord in that particular locker room. One other quick thing, by the way, you mentioned the Dwayne Wade tweet. Yeah. I think there's more to that tweet. I know this is a Timberwolves topic.
Sure, no,
I think that's some of Dwayne's own personal stuff. I think eventually he'll sign with the Heat, but I think that there's some. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a subtle dig there about his situation at the moment.
Right, and I mean, Dwayne, there was also a tweet or Instagram, I don't remember which media it was on, where he was sort of saying, you know, that's leadership, you go get it, UD, you know, with Haslam, and all the replies were, what about you, Dwayne? What's going on with you? So clearly there's something going on. Paul, you know Thibs well from being together in Boston. This is a little bit of a make or break year, right?
It definitely is a make or break year because if they don't take the necessary steps because they have the talent. You brought in Jimmy Butler, who's an all-star. Cat, there's a concern. One thing that's concerning me is Cat not signing an extension. I mean, come on, how many times do you see a young guy have $150+ million in front of him and be like, hold on right now? You know, you don't see that a lot.